What's up, guys? It's Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be talking about 3 things that Division I wide receivers do and 3 things that they do in their own game to create them as much separation as possible, whether it's off the line or whether it's at the top of the route. So I hope this video gives you some value, gives you some things that you guys can take, hopefully to get you guys to that next level, okay? But also, fellas, if you're a wide receiver and you want to get faster off that line of scrimmage, you want to be more explosive into your breaks at the top of the route, you want to improve your grip strength so your catching ability improves, check out that very first link in the description, fellas, for our wide receiver gym bundle. What this is, it's an 8-week-long wide receiver gym training program. So it's not just specific exercises that you could find anywhere. It's specific exercises broken down for the wide receiver position. We give you the reason behind each exercise, specific sets, reps, rest days, conditioning days, and all the above broken down to a step-by-step 28-day plan times 2. So it's an 8-week plan. So hope you guys can check that out. Very first link in the description. Let's get started. So this first route we're going to be looking at here is from Rondale Moore. It's a dive release into a 10-yard speed out. Now, main thing that we're going to talk about, the first thing that's going to separates a lot of guys when they make that jump to that next level. You could tell when you see on film is not rounding their cuts, right? So at the top of the break, when you got to run a 10-yard out, right? So Moore, he decides to go, this is a great release. I just want to talk about this just for a second, but it's a dive release, right? So what a dive release is, where you dive inside. We're trying to make this DB think that I'm running a drag, and then I just created all this space for myself to work back to the outside, right? So that's what that release is. That's why he goes with that, right? But now, when I come up to break off that 10-yard out, it's a speed out. It's like a 6-step out. So usually it's my third inside step. So let's count as steps. That's 1, 2, bam. Breaking right off of that third inside, right at that 10-yard mark to be able to get him out flat. Now, what a lot of receivers will do, and this is where it comes into play, a lot of receivers at the lower levels of football, they'll run up into this thing, they'll run up fast, but when they make this cut, it's not sudden enough, it's not explosive enough, and then they end up drifting off this route. Now, in some cases, there are out routes where you want to break this thing at like 8 yards and then you round it up to 10, right? It's not more of like a heavy indicator cut route, and that's something you'd want to use against man coverage. But if you got like zone coverage and you're here, you might be breaking it at 8, rounding it up to 10, just because that's where the quarterback expects you to be. But against man coverage, I always like going with this just heavy indicator cut. Let's get me out of this route right now. Now, you see how when Moore goes here, he does a great job of staying right at 10, like 10 up to 12, maybe like a little bit of a drift, but not a ton of a drift. This is a perfect situation. That's a perfect route when you have to make this 90-degree cut. So now, when I make this break, what gets me there? Obviously, being sudden. Being sudden with this foot is obviously what slows you down. So anytime you guys are making a cut, like a post route, corner route, out route, or maybe even a dig route where you cut off of one leg, that cut has to be sudden, right? Because the suddenness is what changes direction. It's like when you see a running back running and he's committed, like let's say he's running to the left side of the field and he's got to make a cut back. He doesn't do all these short, choppy steps because that's going to be slow and the defense is going to wrap him up, no problem. He makes that just bam, puts his foot in the ground and then goes. That's how we have to treat it at the top of the route. But again, I got to be sudden, and when I strike this ground, it's super important that I'm not striking it on my heels, because when you go heels, all that energy from your legs shoots up in the air and then you lean back, and that's why some guys will take like choppy steps at the top of the break. And then you don't want to be on your tippy toes, because when you cut on your tippy toes, you're going to end up falling forward. You're going to be off balance. You want to make sure that you make that sudden cut. You're just shooting this thing straight in the ground. It's underneath your frame. You're not reaching, and it's not super choppy, and you're on the middle part of that foot. The reason why you're on the middle part of that foot is because that's where your explosion comes from. Think of it like a pitcher in baseball. When a pitcher's pitching off the mound, he's pushing off that inside arch of his leg. So that's where we have to push, and that's where we have to cut. So now we see when Moore makes this break, you see he has a little bit of a drag. This is not this big situation. You guys know that I'm probably against the drag. That's a drag that I'm okay with, because that wasn't a drag to slow him down. That was just a drag because he's changing direction. He's running fast. The problem that I have is when we reach out for a cut. When a receiver reaches all the way up here and this back leg trails way behind and all this grass pops up, or all this turf pops up in the air, that's when I have a problem with the drag. So the drag is not an issue here if it's a small drag and it's not a drag to change direction. That's how I feel about that. So now, what gets him out of this thing? What keeps him on that 90-degree besides the cut? That has to do with his right arm and this right hip. So you almost want to think of it like, I think of your right hip in this case as like a windshield wiper. You want to open up your right hip and really open up there and really get those hips committed to that 90-degree break. You got to make sure that you get your hips there. But a lot of guys will get their hips there, but they still end up drifting off the route. They fade this way. And then that DB can undercut it, especially when that ball's thrown, and he's got an easy opportunity to take this 6 the other way. So you got to make sure that I open up my hips on that windshield wiper, and you almost want to pretend with your right arm that you want to elbow somebody behind you. You see how Moore shoots that arm around and he really swings this? That's what we have to do. You got to rip those arms to be able to get your hips fully committed. Yes, you can open up your hips, but you can still fade if your arms go dead. You want to make that sudden cut and rip those arms almost like you got to elbow somebody behind you to make sure that your hips get right down that 90 and you don't fade away from this break. Okay, so those are the main keys. D1 wide receivers do not drift at the top of the route. They're able to make crisp cuts and have that smooth change of direction. Let's watch the thing again, full speed one more time. Great job setting it up with that dive release and not really having much of a drift on this route. Okay, so the second thing that Division I wide receivers can do, fellas, and this is something that really separates those average guys in high school from those guys that really do make it to that next level, even just a college receiver, is that they trust themselves at the top of the route. They don't force a release because of the specific route. So let's look at this route. This is Devontae Smith. So he gives this little split release and takes the inside release on like a corner route or almost like an out route, kind of depending on what you want, how you see it. But either one's fine. It could be for either or, right? So I got this DB. It looks like he's a little bit outside shade, right? Maybe a little bit outside shade, kind of head up. But you see how he wants us to go to the outside. He wants us to run to the outside. He's giving us the outside. So if we run to the outside, he could get hands and force me straight to the sideline. Fine. If that's what he wants to do and he wants to line up outside shade like that, fine by me. But if he is inside shade, it's a whole different story. If he's inside shade, yes, we want to take the outside release. But if I feel like I don't want to force the outside release, if I feel like he's going to get hands, I could take this inside release no problem because I can trust myself at the top of the route. Okay, so that's a lot of guys think that, oh, I have an outside breaking route, like an out route, a corner route. I got to take an outside release. But if you guys force it, if you guys force that release and this DB is able to get hands, he's going to force you all the way to that sideline, even if you're combating his hands just because he has momentum and he's really trying to be physical, and then you have no space from your quarterback for him to lead you, for him to throw you open. So I would rather have you take the inside release, work to restack back over the top, then have that quarterback give that quarterback space to be able to throw you open. So you see how Smith, that's exactly what he does. He hits him with his split release, takes the inside release here. Now there's a couple different things that we can do, right? Because everybody loves to play the what if game, and you need to play the what if game as a receiver. What if he's playing this well? What if he's over the top? What's something you could do? You could work a throw by technique. What if you're beating him with speed like Devontae Smith is right here? I want to work back over the top, restack, and then give him a little head fake to the inside to get him to sit on like a post, get him to sit on a dig, and then look at all this space I just created for myself. There's two different ways that you can work that, okay? The only route that might be a little hesitant to do this on is maybe a comeback route, right? Inside release, comeback. But again, what you would do is you'd have to throw him by, or you could restack. Same principles apply. It's just a tougher break. It's a tougher route to do. But if he's taking away that outside shade, you got to be able to take the inside release, okay? So there's a great example of Smith trusting himself at the top of the route. You got to trust yourself on every single route that you could take an inside release or outside release. So when you guys are training, you guys got to be working these different situations. You shouldn't just be running routes against just off coverage and just zone and then just getting in the break, getting out of the break, right? Yeah, that's good. You want to work that, but you got to work every situation, because when you get to that next level, you're going to start seeing press coverage. Youth ball, you're probably not seeing a whole lot of press coverage unless it's third down and they're trying to stop a pass. It's obviously a passing situation. Or in high school, same idea. You're probably not seeing a ton of man, but when you go to camps where you got to stand out in front of a college coach, when you go to showcases, or when you get to actual college, you got to be able to get off a press. So that's what this is getting you ready for, and you got to be able to trust yourself. Let's watch the thing again, full speed one more time. Great example of D1 wide receivers being able to trust themselves at the top of the break, okay? So now, next clip we're going to talk about here is that how receivers are able to get into a route with no indicators, right? So that's something that so many, and honestly, I'm going to be real with you, even Division I wide receivers struggle with this, okay? So this is something that you really got to do to be at that next level, is that you can't give an indicator to this DB of what you're going to do. And if you guys follow this page, you guys have heard me talk about this before, but it's really like, and again, a lot of this stuff is very repetitive, but it's really not that complicated, fellas. It's not rocket science. We like to break it down and we like to get really detailed, but it's not rocket science. It's just repetition. It's just being able to do it over and over and over again. So many receivers don't get enough reps that they need to get in. There's no excuse. If you don't have a quarterback, you should be running routes regardless. You don't need to be catching a ball off of every single one. Yeah, it certainly helps, but you got to be out there working those different situations so you could actually apply it, because all a repetition game. So when Ridley gets off the line of scrimmage here, he bursts up to the outside. 3 keys, fellas, and that's all we're going to talk about. Stride, eyes, and body language. That's it. So what do I mean by body language? Is the one I get the question on. Hey, coach, what do you mean about pad level? Because everybody understands stride. You want to be in full stride. You don't want to be taking these long strides where you're slow. You don't want to be taking choppy strides where this DB can react. But what do I mean by pad level? Pad level is you want to be in this specific angle with your pad level. Your eyes obviously want to be straight forward, but you don't want to be too hunched forward. A lot of guys will almost like bend at their waist and be like really hunched forward. Now, the issue with that is you can't really drop your pad level. You see, when Ridley gets up into this break, it's like he's standing up and running like his back is straight, but he's not leaning back, right? Those are the two keys. You want to be, this is the perfect position that you could be with your pad level. You don't want to be too far hunched forward where there's no drop of your hips, because that drop of your hips is where you decelerate. If you're too far hunched forward, you're going to just sink your hips and you're going to have all these choppy steps. You're not going to have an explosive drop, which is what slows you down. And then if you're leaning back, indicator to the DB that you're making a break. This is the perfect pad level to be in, where you could actually drop your weight. Like you see how Ridley does, he drops his weight here, and you maintain that explosion to where you're not leaning back and you could just stop right on a dime. Perfect example here from Ridley. Let's watch the thing again, full speed one more time. Great job giving this move, pushing up to the outside, then being able to drop this thing right off. Perfect example of what D1 wide receivers can do at the top of the route. And even D1 guys struggle with that, fellas. If you want to take your game really to that next level and really stand out, that's something that you got to be able to do. All right, guys, we want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to leave those in the comments below. I really appreciate always the feedback. And again, fellas, 8-week wide receiver gym training program, specific exercises to help you on the field, the direct translation to on the field workouts, wide receiver gym bundle, very first link in the description. Hope you guys could check that out. I'll see you guys next time.